I'm Jason Radisson, and this is CEO Tradecraft. This episode, my guest is Eileen Moore Johnson. She and I go back more than 20 years. We first overlapped at Harrah's Caesars and crossed paths again when I was running Uber in her region. She's one of the most experienced operators in U.S. hospitality and one of the few who've led inside a top-tier private equity structure. At Caesars, she was regional president responsible for multiple billion-dollar P&Ls on the Las Vegas Strip, right in the middle of one of the largest, most complex LBOs in U.S. history, $31 billion backed by TPG and Apollo. This conversation is about real operating leverage, from segmentation to CapEx, from frontline labor to investor negotiations. We also trace a lineage that most people miss, how revenue management systems laid the groundwork for today's large-scale machine learning platforms. If you run a portfolio company, a frontline P&L, or you're thinking about AI in the real world, this episode hits squarely in the middle of that Venn diagram. Here's the show. Eileen, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you on today. I want to start from the top. How did you come to join the casino industry?
Yeah, thank you, Jason. It's such a great question. I was one of those strange people in high school that knew exactly what they wanted to do. So I started working in the hotel industry really when I was 16 years old, as soon as I got my driver's license. And I started at the Hotel Fair at West Point Military Academy, which was really close to my hometown, Cornwell, New York. And so I had a family influence, which was my dad worked in hotels as a head of finance, and my mom worked in the travel industry. She worked for United Airlines. And so really at a young age, I was influenced into the world of hospitality, travel, and tourism. So again, in high school here, I'm sitting here going, I know my path. I know what I want to do, very purpose-driven in that. So from there, I applied and went to Cornell Hotel School. So to really hone my craft and understand hospitality as a business. Really, Cornell today is much more of a business program. At that time, it was more hospitality focused, but really a miniature business school using hotels as the example for each of those cases that you're learning. And when I graduated, I was really fortunate to get the opportunity to work for Hilton Hotels at the Waldorf Astoria in New York City. And around that time, this is the early 90s, so I'm going back a long time, revenue management was really just hitting the hotel industry. So it had existed in airlines where it kind of got its start in car rentals. And Marriott was the first chain to really launch yield management and revenue management and price setting and forecasting. So at that time, Hilton was playing a bit of catch up. And so it was a really awesome time to join the industry because we were able to use cutting edge technology to forecast and predict customer segmentation at a detailed level to be able to say, hey, who's going to come and when and how to optimize and price it. So I spent several years at the Waldorf and with Hilton rolling out their revenue management program and the technology associated with that. And it caught the attention of Fairmont hotels. So then I moved to San Francisco. I went from what was the most expensive city at the time, New York, to then topping it because Silicon Valley was heating up and moved to San Francisco.
For sure.
And rolled out revenue management for Fairmont hotels. Well, this caught the attention of a gaming company called Harrah's Entertainment. They hired the same vendor who had built the revenue management system as Hilton. So in 1999, I got a call through the vendor that the gaming company was looking to establish a revenue management practice. And since I had rolled it out in two different major flag chains, both Hilton and Fairmont, they were quite interested in having me come to Las Vegas. And so in 1999, I joined Caesars and went on a 21-year run of a lot of different positions.
Absolutely.
Which we'll talk about today. But started off as a revenue management person.
Amazing. I think revenue management in my mind is an early version of, I think, where a lot of employment is headed. In the sense you have, a smart person with a lot of math skills and technology skills running an automated platform. I remember from our days, we would acquire other hospitality companies. And one of the first things we would do would be replace the manual revenue management with our automated systems. It means a lot of those revenue managers you don't need anymore because the system is making all these decisions.
Yes. And optimizing everything. So many more inputs than what you could do in a spreadsheet, as an example.
So you apprenticed with Gary Loveman in those early days.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, he's been a mentor for me throughout my career and life. I'm still in touch with him, which is really wonderful that I can tap into his brain. I mean, obviously, he's one of the smartest people. Had a tremendous run as CEO, went along with him on that ride where we grew Harrah's really 10x, being a small, more regional based Harrah's Entertainment to then taking over Caesars, really, which was the largest LBO in history at that time in 2006 when Gary took us private at 91 a share. I think the deal was somewhere around 31 billion with unfortunate timing, 2006, as it turns out, and you play through the next year, 2007, 2008. But really to see how the company survived that and continued to grow, and even where it sits today with over 45 plus casinos really all around the United States and doing such a tremendous job. But Absolutely. Gary in particular, former Harvard Business School professor. I was his chief of staff for 2.5 years. And I did so much growth and learning. It was really breaking out of revenue management where I was considered an expert and really knew what I was talking about to really sitting in that C-suite. I'm really preparing presentations for the board of directors, getting to sit in the boardroom and hear those conversations because I was the person operating the technology and making sure that we had everything needed for a successful meeting. And also creating employee presentations and understanding how key decisions are getting made in the CEO level and the interactions with the CEO and COO positions, wildly growing the company at the same time. And so watching him juggle all of that was really fantastic and just a great learning. It also inspired me to go back to school and get my MBA. So coming off of my stint as chief of staff, then I went to Kellogg and went to the executive MBA program and worked full-time while I also studied in Evanston on campus.
Yeah. I mean, that general management career path and the apprenticeship, even today with the President's Associates and the other programs, very pronounced in Caesars. If memory serves, you went to slots, right? Which I think at the time was the biggest revenue line in the company.
Yes.
And then to a general manager role.
Yeah. So I moved after chief of staff to a newly created role. And I brought some of the skill sets I had on the revenue management side to become the vice president of revenue management. There were many myths in the gaming industry that customers could tell slot hold, which we know today is impossible because the hold of a slot machine and the payback percentage, pays out over a distribution of 10 million handle pulls. Also making sure that we were checking the math, that the games were very exciting. So what's the hit frequency? What are the types of payouts? Also floor placement, putting your best product in the best place. We spend some time with the head of store layouts at Best Buy as an example, and with Target as an example in their corporate office, understanding some of the ways that they were setting up their retail environments. And one of the things that Gary was really wonderful about instilling in all of us was test and control. So we might do it in one area of the casino in one market and not another. Or we'd take two very similar markets with the same customer frequency and similar market size, and we'd roll out different products and we'd get to really test and see what worked. Key little tweaks that were made on the casino floor. I remember one project that we realized we made in 1 year over 100 million in improvements. So you mentioned it earlier, but a lot of people don't know this. The slot machines, particularly for Caesars at that time, that was 80% of our casino revenue and 90% of the profits at many of our locations. So there's a lot of glitz and glamour around the table games. They're very important, particularly at the high-end properties where you have VVIPs playing those table games. But in many of the other markets, slots was your bread and butter and really how you took care of your employees and took care of your guests.
Kind of classic examples of maximizing your profits, and particularly in the middle of the market as we did back then. From there, you went to Louisiana and had your first general manager assignment. And what were the key learnings and experiences you had as a general manager?
Yeah, I would tell you. So I relocated my family from Las Vegas. I had a baby. And so I remember he was so little, he was still in his little baby car seat and driving from Nevada to Louisiana, which was a great adventure. We moved there after Hurricane Katrina. At that time, it was really rebuilding the city and getting that hotel open. The lessons that I learned is it's all about the team. So we had 7,500 employees. Gary Loveman, as our CEO, made the fantastic decision to pay our employees and keep their benefits whole throughout the several months of closure. So when we reopened, the community really held us in high esteem, which was a fantastic time to be a leader and be able to build it back. And as the story goes, we had a great run. We set records. We were able to build the platform, hosted an NBA All-Star game that beat all of the state revenue records set up to that point. Obviously, the Saints had a run there, won the Super Bowl in Miami. It's just a great time for New Orleans to bounce back. And so proud of the work there. But it's easy to set those policies, but sometimes finding out how to pay for them is the more difficult exercise. But when you can, that's when the magic happens, and you see that.
And I think that GM lens in hiring is something that also being just an extremely high talent bar, yes, but also in a way a career promise, right? If you're performing well, that there's a series of steps that get you on this path to CEO.
Yes, it's true. And you mentioned the President's Associate Program. And if we look at leaders across, the industry, you would see a lot of graduates from that program. So the way it worked was a recruiting effort at some of the top MBA programs. So we spent a lot of time on campus paneling candidates. We did different types of interviews. We would have them come out to Las Vegas and play in a poker tournament. So we would see how they interacted, because in our positions, whether you're based at corporate or in the casino, and this is true in hospitality and gaming, you're going to be interacting with lots of team members and having to motivate and inspire them. And you're going to have to be entertaining lots of guests. And so those are important skill sets that when you're having a traditional interview may or may not shine through.
And it was, if memory serves, a pretty crazy time, because we're talking the financial crisis, the LBO. What was that period like?
Yeah, I actually left Louisiana and went north up to Indiana and ran a region there with another regional property and added 2 casinos in Illinois. So I branched out to have multi-jurisdictional, and that was actually my first president role, which was really beneficial because, again, now I'm in a frequency market where you're seeing your best guests every week. So then in 2013, tapped to go to Las Vegas and build out the east side of the strip. We actually called it the hospitality pod because it was over $1 billion in capital investment to really change that side of the strip. So I ran 4 resorts. I ran Harrah's, the newly developed Link, the Link Promenade, the High Roller, which is the observation wheel, the Flamingo, as well as Cromwell, so that entire district. And what was interesting was each one had its own ownership group, and in some cases reported up through different leadership. So I was the regional president and the P&L owner and had to deliver. I also held the key gaming license for the state, the privilege license to have the ability to operate those properties. I had a lot of different leaders that I reported into. The Flamingo, as an example, had its own commercially backed mortgage. It was not involved in what was to come, which was a bankruptcy. In fact, none of my properties were involved in that bankruptcy. In Las Vegas, only Caesar's Palace was involved due to its debt instruments.
Yeah, there was a bit of complexity in the structure, and of course, there's been a lot of reporting on it, for those listeners that may have read the Caesar's Palace coup,
yes,
which was excellently reported a few years back about the bankruptcy. And I think in particular, the sort of different competing interests and stakeholders. And there were properties that certainly came through much better than others. Well, very interesting times. Any advice for somebody that would find themselves suddenly working for a top 4 private equity fund?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of interesting because a lot of people will talk about going from a large public company, which we did, then to being private with TPG and Apollo. And they talk about it as, now you're going to have much more longer term focus. It won't be the quarterly numbers to hit in the public markets. And ironically, I found it the opposite. It amplified, I think, the pressure cooker to be able to make sure that the deal could hit those milestones and fundamentals. And obviously, we threw everything at it to make that happen. And the fact that we were able to go through a restructuring with a big portion of the company and they were able to keep the assets together. The work done by TPG, Apollo, our board, our debt holders, it was really an amazing feat. If I were to tell someone now who finds themselves in those circumstances, really be on your game and deep into the details around your financials that make the business tick. and in really micro segments. To take that then down to doing more of like a weekly flash and making sure you knew exactly which drivers were pushing your P&L in certain directions, that was a new exercise, at least for myself on the operations side, to be able to answer to that in a much tighter cadence of time as the questions were coming.
So a major difference in sort of the level of granularity and specificity required?
For sure. And a level of detail and debate, always in a positive and professional manner, enthusiastically, arguing your point, in a professional way. I can tell you about a time when one of the principals of Apollo came to visit me in my property because we were spending, I don't know, let's see, maybe around 260 million to redo the 2,000 hotel rooms. And that's a chunk of change. So he had a lot of questions for me, and we actually physically toured the product. But what I was impressed was, here he is, a billionaire, just a titan at that time. He asked me a lot of detailed questions. One that I'll never forget was, why do you need to have irons and ironing boards in every room, Eileen? And I said, well, because there's 2,250 rooms in this property. And what I would tell you is one of the top 3 requests for housekeeping is, may I have an iron and an ironing board? I've run properties all over the world from various sizes of 200 rooms up to 4,000 rooms. And it's in the top 3 at all of those locations. And he just kind of stared at me and he's like, nobody uses an iron and an ironing board. And I really didn't know what to say, but there was a young designer that was with us that had worked on some of the designs. So I turned to him and I said, this guy irons his jeans to go to the club. I took a bet. And he looked at me and he goes, well, she's right, I do that. And then he looked at me and goes, fine, give her the irons and ironing. Now, it sounds hilarious, but on the backside, the reason I was so stressed about having them in the room was, in 2,250 rooms, I would have had to hire runners just to handle all the calls because we ran 98% full, Jason. So you're talking thousands of guests. You never are going to be able to predict when they're going to need that and in which location. So here I'd have, let's say you had 200 irons and ironing boards in housekeeping. I mean, the operation needed, this is before you could have a bot do it, right? I was thinking the math on the labor would kill my property and would kill my service scores, which means your rates are low, right?
Probably amortize those irons in less than a year.
Alone, I think in a month, I could charge $2 more. The room had a proper fit out, right? It doesn't have what you're looking for, whether that's a safe in the room, as a female, is it a blow dryer that's competent? That's something that's going to take you now an hour to get ready.
And this is pre-pandemic and athleisure.
Yes, absolutely.
What did you guys get right at the time? Are there decisions where you say, oh, in hindsight, we should have done this and, we would have done better coming out of the financial crisis?
Yeah, I would say, one of the things that the company got right, and the strategy was set before my arrival, but it was to focus on a hospitality customer. We had been so gaming focused all of those years. We added assets like the Flamingo, where we made much more money on the hospitality side, out at our pool, in our restaurants, in the 3,600 rooms, than the casino. The casino was quite profitable, but it wasn't, the main attraction for that property. It was a full-scale resort. And so and we were a little bit, I think, ahead of the curve. Vegas in general as a market started to focus more on, that's when you started to see better celebrity chef restaurants coming. We had good restaurants, but they were kind of spread out all over town. Now you can't go into any resort without seeing one of the top chefs from around the world. A great example of that is when we opened Cromwell. We have Giada De Laurentiis' first restaurant, and it's on arguably the 50-yard line of the Las Vegas Strip, the corner of the Flamingo Avenue, with a view of the fountains. And we actually have windows, that open. And so you're getting that $1 million view every time you dine there. That property actually only has a little over 200 rooms. So it wasn't going to be lodgers and the rooms driving the success of that. So having that name brand, her first restaurant, and she's one of the most recognized chefs in the world, drove a ton of foot traffic. Again, doing Dre's nightclub on the roof. So we took a approach really driven by Victor Dre, who's known as the king of clubs around the world, to take live artists. So we launched maybe some names you recognize, like The Weeknd. He got his start at Dre's nightclub up on the rooftop. I remember 2016, he had an artist who was just starting to get well known, Kendrick Lamar. Yeah, and so really, I mean, the artist list goes on and on. Again, not enough lodgers with 200 rooms to drive that success of that club. And at that time, that was one of the most profitable clubs. It
Yeah.
was very exciting to see. And 4,000 people could fit in that club and watch a lot. So that was what we got right. What we got wrong, I would say, so many things. But again, working at Caesars was great for all those years because we were allowed to really test and learn.
As you look at your own transition then to technology and the technology roles that you've had, you're one of the only executives to come out of the hospitality industry and given all that general manager talent. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You get really enamored with the excitement of the business
Mm-hmm.
because every day it's something new. And so I think all of those variables create an environment of a lot of action and excitement that keeps people in those paths. And they don't necessarily look to say, wow, a lot of those ingredients are also present in technology. You have to keep reinventing yourself. And so I saw that pretty early on in my career. I was very fortunate to lead a lot of large technology projects. How that transition for me as a regional president was, my properties became the test beds. We tested all of the latest software, all of our customer tracking. And what that allowed me to do was get really conversant in technology.
Probably I'm stating the obvious, but the whole business is math. And it's very profitable. There are a few people that will manage to lose money in the casino business. You've got these incredible margins, which is like software. If you could describe for our listeners, what's it like, the weekly or daily process for being a big P&L owner in a hospitality company?
I mean, immediate. We had everything on our phones. Go to bed, I'd be looking at the coin in. I don't need to look at visitation numbers. I can tell by coin in who's in the building and what we're going to do. And did I make my nut for that day? And we break it into micro segments. Then we had visualizations working with the data that's coming off of the slot floor, where there were hot zones and not hot, and were there any changes that needed to be made. We were getting tables of which guests were where on my phone so I could go greet them personally. They don't know I'm tracking, right? Back then, they really didn't. So there was a lot of magic that we were able to do. It's just a lot of micro measurements hitting you at all times. You're looking at all of those variables. So to your point, it's a lot of math, but also a ton of data. And putting that into casinos to make sure at our fingertips, we had access to the right data to make the best decisions.
Yeah, and I remember, within Uber, the Las Vegas Strip was the most sophisticated navigation and mapping in the world. Every property was negotiated. And if you think about it, I mean, the retail environment of a casino is probably the most sophisticated retail management in the world.
I agree.
Just the sheer number, the amount of data and the value of it all, because customers are walking around spending thousands of dollars. It's a very different environment from a supermarket.
I had my Uber stations front and center. They were as good, if not better than taxi. I correctly predicted, because Vegas was a late market for Uber, right? There was a lot, you can go into that.
Oh yeah, don't remind me.
Getting Uber here was a big deal for us. We were late. I mean, I had known from traveling around the world, it was going to be an instant hit because we had an issue with transportation. We still do. In Las Vegas. And so putting those front and center, and then I'd go visit my, larger, more sophisticated competitor, and it would be way in the back, a terrible experience for like the drivers, the guests that they were dropping, and they just didn't get it. Now, flash forward 10 years, most of them have fixed it, but I'll tell you, there's some new big resorts in town, and some of them have it perfect, where you get right off and go right in. And some of them still have it out in a back parking lot. And I'm thinking, this is a $3 billion development. How did you miss where to put your main transportation drop off? Anyways.
I think about it every time I land in an airport and I can't get out of there. Always negotiated terms around those pickup and drop off points. What are your thoughts about where things are headed? Are we going to see hotel industry executives, hospitality industry executives going to tech? Are we going to see them coming back? Does Dara leave Uber and go run Marriott or something? Where is this all headed?
I see it as really circular, more so than like, is it a drain here or going here? I think gaming in general is a natural. I mean, of course, bricks and mortar casinos, right? It's a massive industry. But now with online and the capabilities of what's allowed around the world. So I would like to see that. And I think that's a prediction that I have, that you will see more, especially gaming. As gaming becomes more prevalent and everybody has it available on their mobile devices, Why wouldn't resorts? It's just another amenity. That's what we've seen in tourist destinations around the world. When you add the casino, it's not that that takes over. It's just an amenity to the overall resort experience. And so I think you'll see more hospitality people get conversant and comfortable in gaming and then maybe make that switch into gaming. I think you will see a lot of tech executives because it's just rife with the opportunity to do what tech does best. Use data, use insights, innovate, create amazing user experiences, and bring it to life. And technologists, when they get to work in that environment and see their tech come to life, that's magical for them. And given your background and expertise, Jason, I'm curious how you would answer that.
I think we're in a period where we're all going to get a lot more leverage. It's not the time where everybody knows what to do and you go out and you stamp out companies. It's more the time of experimentation and seeing what the user experience is going to be. If I were a hospitality exec, I'd be thinking, at least in the back of my mind, there's probably a really interesting job in tech for me in a couple years.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think that's what makes it exciting, right? And just to see the
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, that's probably a good place to leave it. Eileen, it's been a great pleasure having you on the show. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jason, and be well.
Thank you. If you're a high volume operation or scaling under private equity pressure, I hope this gave you something real to take back to your team. Hit follow for more episodes like this. And if you're a CEO with scars and stories to share, reach out.